Yeah, I left university and I went straight away to work for an investment bank, Citigroup. I was a wealth manager there in London, mostly working with high net worth clients, global diversification. And then almost immediately, the 2008 crisis happened. And I learned, I think, very quickly a hard lesson, and that is that, you know, when the United States sneezes, the rest of the world got very, very, very sick. And I saw this that the response from central banks around the world was just immediately to start printing trillions of dollars, pounds, euros, yen. And I started to realize it just didn't make sense to me to create value out of nothing, right? And then obviously the European debt crisis unfolded, and I realized that the world was shifting in a direction, and that I sort of thought precious metals may be a good place for investors over the next 5, 10, 15 years. It turned out to be the case. Moved to the United States, have an opportunity with Birch, and as I mentioned to you earlier, I became a US citizen in 2022. So I'm here and very happy. Look, it was at the time it was the top company in the gold IRA space. But what really interested me, it wasn't about necessarily the size of the company; it was the philosophy behind it. Birch was and is and always has been focused on education first. The goal wasn't to push people into a product, but basically to help them understand the risks in the system, and they decide for themselves. So they had a big educational piece, which I've been a big part of really since the beginning. And that to me was the real driver. I think that's how people make proper decisions, is from a very informed perspective. And as I mentioned to you, there were times in my career where I didn't understand the value of gold, and I was a banker. So for most people, they really did. And that was what really attracted me to Birch. And like I said, ever since I've been here, and I've been here a long time now, we've just continued to build out that education piece, and we've helped a lot of people. And it doesn't seem to be the same focus for others. So that's probably the real thing that drew me to Birch, and ultimately has kept me here for such a long time. I think we're learning more and more and more why they matter in the current climate. Most of what people think of as wealth today is basically just a promise, right? Whether it's a promise to repay a loan, a promise to share future earnings. Even the dollar's actual value depends on the purchasing power of currency, something that we basically have no control over. Bank accounts depend on the banking system working in the ways that people expect. Physical gold and silver are just different. They're one amongst very few major assets that you can own outright that are not somebody else's liability. That doesn't mean, by the way, they're better than all the other things that I mentioned, but it means that they have a very specific purpose, right? They're portable, they're liquid, they're globally recognized stores of value, and they're more practical than other commodities. What we're seeing today are things like inflation and currency devaluation. These issues are specific to currency, and gold is very much a hedge against that. And they're completely separate from this financial and debt-based system. The idea with gold is it just holds its value, and it has done throughout history, right? There's a story I tell all the time, but you go back to biblical times and an ounce of gold bought 400 loaves of bread, and it basically does the same thing today. What people don't realize is it's currency, right? Currency fluctuates. Currency becomes weaker over longer periods of time always, and when it does, you just need more weaker currency to buy gold. So, in climates like this specifically, when we're seeing buying power disappear, it becomes very, very important. And it's done that always. And there are very few things that you could say that about. Gold is considered a safe haven asset. And I think the thing I hear a lot is that, owning gold means some dramatic bet against America or bet against the financial markets. And it's not how I really see it at all. For me, first of all, gold is not an all or nothing decision. It's about diversification, right? And I think in climates like this, it makes a ton of sense. But, I believe in America. I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe in our innovation. And I recognize at the same time as all of that, that we've also created serious risks through debt, inflation, money printing. Steve Forbes, I think, said it quite well, the publishing executive. He said, gold functioned to him as a type of insurance policy, something to rely on when bureaucracies and other things failed. And that's kind of how I see them. They're not there to replace everything, like I said, but they're a form of insurance within the portfolio to say, look, if things go wrong, if we start to see issues elsewhere, this is a portion of our portfolio that we can rely on during tough times. It tends to be counter-cyclical, so that's why I think the insurance analogy works quite well, right? Something that goes up when other things go down. And I think if people view it like that, it becomes a prudent step. And as I've said, I think twice already, specifically in climates like this, like you look at the nature of our problems, we have debt, deficit, inflation persistence, and commodities in general work really well for the reason I mentioned, right? Inflation is defined as the rising cost of commodities and services. So I think they're just a very useful hedge. And like I said, it's not a bet against the country, it's just a form of insurance. And I think people should view it like that. Look, everybody is different, so it's very difficult as a blanket statement to say, yeah, it makes sense for everyone today, because it really is down to the customer. It's about their goals, their dreams, their risk tolerance, their time horizon. Physical precious metals are, like I mentioned, they're a counter-cyclical or a defensive asset. I think they always serve a purpose, right? Which is an inflation hedge. But I think in times like this, when you have specific problems, they become much more important, right? Like I mentioned to you, I think one of our biggest issues lies with currency. It's debt and deficit. There are very few commodities. Well, that's not true. Commodities in general can hedge against dollar decline, but it's very difficult. There are very few investable commodities. You could hedge dollar decline using pork bellies or bushels of wheat. The problem is they're hard to store and they spoil. So it's a very unique commodity that is designed to hedge currency decline and hedge inflation. And I think in very tough climates, it becomes even more important. So in answer to your question, like I said, it's specific. There'll still be people today that it's not suitable for, but I think everybody today, given the problems, should certainly be considering it. And I think, like I said, specifically in tough times, they perform very, very well. And we're seeing that play out every day today. For the customer, it's really simple. It's just an IRA rollover. So as you know, it starts with education. That for us is very important. We make sure the customer understands what they want to do, why they want to do it, and ultimately how it's done. From that point, we handle everything. So I tell the customer, look, you need to be comfortable with us. You need to be comfortable with the process, and you need to have a dollar amount in mind that you want to work with. Once the customer's there, we handle everything. So when they're moving a retirement account, the first step is paperwork. It's rollover paperwork. We'll connect the customer with our IRA processing department. They'll fill out the necessary paperwork with the customer per their instructions. They'll send the paperwork to the customer. Stickies and envelopes and return envelopes. We make it very easy. Customer will sign. If they're happy, send it back, and we'll manage the process from there. It usually takes the sending custodian around 3 to 5 business days. Funds will roll over to the new IRA, and we can allocate physical precious metals in the retirement account. Because it's an IRA, assets have to be held in a licensed and insured depository. Customer can choose from a number of locations. The metals will be held there, fully insured in the customer's name. And from there, it will work like any other IRA. They'll have online accounts, quarterly statements. They can liquidate, or they can take possession of the metal. That would be a taxable event. It would be leaving the IRA, but they would have the option to do it. And the storage fees annually in the IRA are very nominal. It's about $200 a year to store any amount of precious metal. So it's a really good fee and it's fully insured. And that's the process. Yeah, look, it's tough out there. I don't think anybody needs me to say that. It's a very difficult climate to work out because on some levels, the numbers look good. Things like GDP, job numbers aren't terrible. So the actual numbers are not horrendous, but a lot of people's lived experience is really tough because we have things like significant currency devaluation, we have persistent inflation. Even the growth we're seeing is very limited. Like GDP growth last year was driven predominantly by investment in AI data centers. So people really didn't feel the benefit of that. That was a handful of companies investing heavily, which didn't benefit anybody outside of their stockholders. So it's a really, really tough climate to navigate. The big issue and the longer term and the real driver for gold longer term is debt, right? Washington now has $39 trillion in debt. We have a $2 trillion annual deficit, right? So we're adding to the debt $2 trillion a year. It's an almost unsolvable problem long term. And, you know, the Federal Reserve, the government have got themselves in a position where they're just printing money to service debt liabilities. What that does always, unavoidably, is devalue currency and fuel inflation. And that's where gold and silver come in, right? As the dollar goes down, for the reason I mentioned earlier, gold prices just go up. Being a commodity, as the cost of living rises, gold and silver go up with it. So they're a very good way to preserve buying power over the longer term. Think about things like cash today, right? People sitting in cash are getting 4.5%. You know, official inflation is 3.8, but real inflation, our lived experience, is actually much higher than that. So I would argue that cash today is losing buying power longer term. So that's the idea with physical precious metals. It's a way to preserve buying power during tough times. And I would say in all of my lifetime, I haven't seen them as important as they are today. I really haven't. There's three things. I'm going to sound like a broken record now because they're all going to tie into the same things. But there's a few different things that I would be watching. One is inflation, the other is federal debt, and the third is confidence in the US dollar. Inflation is the most visible of those problems because people feel it every week at the grocery store, the gas station, when they pay their utility bills. Debt, as we've mentioned, is the deeper problem, right? With 39 trillion in debt, every increase in borrowing cost really start to matter, right? Because we're seeing that the borrowing costs on the debt are going up. The world is looking at us and they're saying, we're lending you money, but you're spending 50% more than you earn every year, right? If I'm asking you for a loan, you're either not going to lend me the money or you're going to say, I'm going to need a little bit more interest. This is risky. That's what's happening. So not only are we amassing more debt, but it's getting more expensive to hold it. And the third signal is a really important one, and it's one that people often overlook, and that's confidence, right? The dollar works because people trust the US dollar, right? They have confidence in the US, and if that confidence weakens, the consequences can move very, very quickly. So it's not one single headline that I would look at, but it's this combination of persistent inflation, rising debt costs, and political dysfunction. And the more that happens, I think more people around the world will start to look for alternatives, and the more the problem will start to hit home. The real issue is debt service, right? The interest payments on the debt are the second biggest expense for the government today. We bring in 5 trillion a year. Social Security is the biggest expense at 1.5. Second is debt service. Third is defense. In the context of history, doesn't bode well. There's something, and this is really depressing, so I apologize, but the British historian, Niall Ferguson, there's something called Ferguson's Law. It's been true of every empire in human history, and it's this. when any great nation spends more on debt service than defense, the empire collapses. And we hit that metric last year. Look, I have faith in American exceptionalism. We have things like AI on the horizon. There could be a lifeline, but from a numbers and from a debt standpoint, the problem's big. It's just about understanding what people are actually trying to prepare for. And that's where the education piece really comes in, right? Understanding what your concerns are, where you see the problems, I think is really important, right? If you're trying to prepare for inflation, a weaker dollar, too much exposure to paper assets, too much trust in Washington to get everything right, you know, once you understand the risks, I think the role of gold and silver becomes much clearer. Physical precious metals, they're not about fear, they're about prudence, they're about taking a portion of what you have worked so hard for and place it into an asset that has survived everything, right? Wars, defaults, currency failures, political upheaval for thousands of years. And it's not an exaggeration, by the way, right? Every year, archaeologists get a metal detector and, or enthusiasts, and they pull up caches of gold and silver coins dating back from the Roman Empire. How many assets could you say that about, right? That have sat underground for thousands of years and still hold value today. Certainly no currencies, nothing, right? It's physical metals have really maintained value over longer periods of time. So I think if people understand what the issues are, where their concerns lie, the solutions present themselves. And for the problems that I've mentioned, precious metals are a really, really good solution. I think for us it was very natural. We believe in One Bison's mission to connect patriotic Americans with businesses that honor traditional values like faith, freedom, service, and it matters a lot, I think, because Americans are becoming more intentional about where they spend their money and essentially who they do business with. They want to know that the companies they support are not just offering a product or a service, but actually, I think, share some of the same principles. So that's very consistent with how we think about our own roles. So when One Bison asked us to be part of this, I think it made a ton of sense for us. And we're proud to stand alongside businesses that believe in faith, family, freedom, and service to this country. And as the first founding partner, I think we can hope to try and set the tone. So that was really, really the driver for us, the connection.